Let's talk about MVP and MVF tests. First of all, what are they? An MVP or minimum viable product is your version 1 release for the product, and an MVF or minimum viable feature is your version 1 release for the feature. But before MVPs and MVFs are created, you may need to run tests, and these tests are user experiences that are created to validate the product or feature idea. And there is a lot of debate over what qualifies as an MVP. Some people argue that a landing page is a valid MVP, and others say it isn't, insisting that an MVP must be a real working product or at least an interactive prototype. To address this concern, it's important to distinguish between the MVP, which is the version 1 product that will be released, and the MVP test, which are experiments run to help you figure out what version 1 should look like. The MVP needs to be a working product, but the tests or experiments can be run in different ways. And the product manager has to weigh factors like the risks involved and the time available to decide how to run experiments. And in the discovery section, we'll get into the practical side of planning and running experiments. But what I want to focus on now is that there is a wrong and a right way of designing an MVP or an MVF. You can separate a product or feature into 4 layers: functionality, reliability, usability, and delight. And when you design an MVP, you have to cut a slice out from the layers like you would a cake. So don't do it like this. Instead, do it like this. In other words, don't simply deliver functionality in an MVP thinking that you can ignore reliability, usability, and delightfulness, because that won't work. While an MVP has limited functionality, it should still be complete in that it should address all the 3 higher level attributes. For example, if you're solving a problem of helping people get from point A to point B, your MVP should look like this, not like this. So let's come back to the MVP tests. When setting up experiments, there are a couple of dimensions to consider. Product managers can firstly set up tests to de-risk assumptions across the user funnel, which covers discovery, evaluation, and usage. And tests that are run up here are more marketing focused, while tests that are run down here are more product focused. And the second dimension on which MVP testing differs is whether they are qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative means that you are talking with customers directly, usually in small numbers that doesn't really yield a statistically significant result. Here you care about the detailed information you can learn from an individual test, and you may try to discern patterns across the results, but statistical significance is not a primary concern. If, for example, you conduct one-on-one feedback sessions with 12 prospective customers to get their feedback on a mock-up of your landing page, then that would be an example of qualitative research. Quantitative research, on the other hand, involves conducting the test at scale with a large number of customers. And you don't really care as much about any individual result and are instead interested in the aggregate results. So if you launched 2 versions of your landing page and directed thousands of customers to each one to see which one had the higher conversion rate, then this would be an example of a quantitative test, in this case also known as an A/B test. And quantitative tests are good for learning what and how many, what action customers took, and how many customers took an action. But quantitative tests will not tell you why they chose to do so or why the other customers chose not to do so. In contrast, qualitative tests are good for learning why, the reason behind different customers' decisions to take an action or not. So both of these kinds of tests are important and they complement one another. And I've seen many teams that tend to rely on one type of testing too heavily, usually the quantitative. And you have to be mindful of what is most important to learn for your situation and choose the type of test accordingly. In general, when you first start developing a product or marketing material, it's most beneficial to start with qualitative testing to gain some initial understanding, because if you jump straight into quantitative tests without doing any qualitative tests, they usually won't perform well. And even if they do, you won't know why. It is common to see product teams alternate between rounds of qualitative and quantitative testing as they learn and iterate towards their version 1 product. Okay, in the next lesson, we will look at some examples of quantitative and qualitative testing. Bye for now.